Well, soon enough in the story of Jonah, a storm comes, and his fellow sailors determine that Jonah is causing that storm, and so they decide to throw him overboard. And so this should be the end of the Jonah story. This should be where his life ends. But God's grace, it comes in unexpected ways. And so for Jonah, God sends grace in the form of a whale. And I want you to catch that because sometimes I think the way we remember this story, the Sunday school version of the story is that God saves Jonah from the whale. But what I want to point out, really, the truth is that Jonah's at the bottom of an ocean. And he is there because he put himself there. His own choices of defiance and disobedience caused him to be far, far, far away from God. And that whale is a source of grace. You see, God saves Jonah from the ocean, and he does that using the whale. The whale is a source of God's grace and mercy. That big old fish is a life raft. It's a lifeguard. It's the rescue boat. This is his savior and his deliverer. And what's so interesting about this is that in Jonah's time, the undersea world was seen as a terrifying and mysterious place. And underwater creatures, they were thought of more like savage monsters. And so this isn't like a friendly whale, free willy kind of situation. This is more of like a Jaws situation. The whale was possibly the scariest thing imaginable that could come and be with Jonah. And yet, it is how God showed up. This week, I read a story about a judge in North Carolina. This judge made news because he had to sentence someone to a night in jail because of violating his probation. And that's not what made the news, but see, that person that he had to sentence to jail, he was a veteran of the war in Afghanistan. And there in Afghanistan, he was in a Jeep. And that Jeep was sinking down into a creek until he thought he was going to drown. He was trapped there, and he watched everyone around him in his convoy die that day. And he was the sole survivor. And because of that experience, small confined spaces were something that completely triggered his PTSD. And the judge knew that when he sentenced him to a night in jail. And so just when this gentleman was praying, Lord, how am I going to get through this? Lord, how will you be there for me in this moment? Who walked into his jail cell but the judge who sentenced him? He showed up there in that cell with him, and he said, I'm here. I'm going to spend the night with you. You see, grace shows up in unexpected ways. Grace shows up in the ways that we often least expect it, in the most surprising of packaging.